The conventional wisdom about the Church of Satan and Anton LaVey is that despite their name, they didn't actually believe in Satan at all, or anything supernatural for that matter. They were supposedly just these humanistic atheists who sometimes used rituals as, quote, psychodramas to focus intentionality and sort of will a desired outcome into being. This is what you'll read in any academic work or encyclopedia entry about LaVeyan Satanism, and from the church itself. Why do Satanists worship the devil? We don't. Satanists are atheists. Satan to us is a symbol of pride, liberty, and individualism, and it serves as an external metaphorical projection of our highest personal potential. We don't believe in Satan as a being or person. Anyone affiliated with the Church of Satan was always eager to stress this during media interviews, that they didn't believe in devil possession or sacrifices to the devil or anything like that, to distinguish themselves from the groups of sincere devil worshippers that were supposedly plaguing America with their ritual human sacrifices. They'd insist that LaVey was just a showman, a carny whose version of Satan was less like the demon from Christian tradition and more like the tragic hero of Paradise Lost. But then, if you read about the history of the Church of Satan, you find out that in 1975, there was a schism in the church where LaVey's second-in-command, Michael Aquino, left the church over his opposition to LaVey selling advanced initiatory degrees and started his own theistic Satanist group called the Temple of Set, taking a significant chunk of the upper-level church members with him. The central text of the Temple of Set was the Book of Coming Forth by Night, which Aquino had supposedly transcribed directly from his interactions with a being called Set, which he said was another name for the Satan of Christianity. So does this story make sense? The supposedly atheist, skeptical humanists of the Church of Satan have a disagreement over church structure, and then suddenly half of the top echelon of the church leaves and decides, actually, I guess Satan is real after all, and you can invoke him using rituals, and now we have a book that transcribes the actual literal words of Satan. So they have a schism, and now all of a sudden, half of them do a complete 180 on the question of whether Satan exists? Well, there's a reason it doesn't make sense. Michael Aquino wrote a book chronicling the history of the church, titled The Church of Satan, and what he describes is much different than the conventional wisdom. Just what were those powers of darkness which Anton felt compelled to formalize into a church? Per Burton Wolf's account, in The Devil's Avenger, Anton sensed them only vaguely as a dark force in nature which could be activated through ceremonial ritual greater magic and personal manipulative lesser magic to fulfill individuals' needs and desires. He identified this dark force as Satan, hence the name he chose for the church. Did Anton LaVey sense Satan as an independent intellectual entity, as opposed to the dark force being a collection of non-conscious, mechanical, physical principles? The evidence from his closest associates at the time is that he did. And here Aquino quotes from an interview he did with Ed Weber, a professional public relations man, friend of Anton LaVey, and an early member of the Church of Satan. Since 1975, Anton LaVey has insisted that he never believed in the existence of an actual devil or Satan, that Satan was only a symbol or metaphor. Was this true when you knew him? Weber says, not at all. He was quite definite that he did believe in the existence of Satan. This was exactly what made the concept of a Church of Satan so fascinating. Anton affirmed his belief in the 1970 documentary film Satanis, in his writing of a personal pact with Satan, and of course with ritual incantations and invocations he fervently uttered while presiding at church rituals. Well, after the crisis of 1975, meaning the schism between the Church of Satan and the Temple of Set, and Anton's disavowal of Satan at that moment, he would insist that the name was a mere metaphor. Such a turnabout was obviously mere rationalization for his actions at that time. Less clear throughout the Church of Satan's 1966 to 75 existence was just who or what Satan as an entity actually was. Certainly, Satanists didn't believe in Jewish, Christian, or Islamic mythology, which they rejected with the same disgust and disdain they held for those religions generally. Rather, the Church of Satan saw its namesake as someone or something truly noble, powerful, and metaphorically authentic, whose image had been distorted and perverted by the vulgar religions into a symbol of everything they feared and hated. And what it was that they feared and hated was not evil, but rather the creative genius of mankind that lifts it above and beyond mere animal existence. What I did not know for many years was that coincidental with the forming of the church in 1966, Anton LaVey had privately handwritten and signed a personal pact with Satan, titled simply My Pact. He never mentioned nor displayed it to others, but on one evening in 1974, during a visit of mine to his house, we happened to be discussing Robert Chambers' The King in Yellow. He left the purple room, then returned with a locked metal strongbox, which he opened, revealing his personal copy of the then quite rare book. The only other item in the strongbox was his pact, which I was unable to read beyond seeing its title and noting that it was completely handwritten on a single sheet of paper. I have often wondered what mirrors of his innermost self it contained. By these criteria, then, the Church of Satan wasn't a church in the precise sense of the term, nor did it worship Satan as an existential being in his own right. Rather, it was atheism with psychodrama, and as Truzzi correctly observed, that was something which could be credibly argued to skeptical audiences. There was, however, a problem. Satanists participating in rituals of black magic quickly became aware of an interest or influence in the atmosphere of the chamber that felt somehow alien to their own personalities. The pageantry and the oratory would fade into the background, and the participants would find themselves gripped in a sensory empathy so piercing, so powerful, that it would leave them exhausted, drained, and shaken at the conclusion of the rite. It was not a chance occurrence, but an inevitable, recurring one. After such experiences, participants were subdued, introspective, and disinclined to exchange comments on their feelings. There was perhaps even a slight feeling of embarrassment, as though one had somehow slipped from being a proper psychodramatic atheist. And Anton LaVey was himself the most familiar with this sensation. His behavior during a ritual was not that of an actor nor of a megalomaniac, but rather of a high priest, in the sincere sense. In public, and to less experienced Satanists, he would continue to excuse the Church of Satan as atheism with frills, but alone with intimates, he would speak of Satan, the Church, and his own office therein with the greatest reverence and respect. He didn't believe after the fashion of the ordinary mystic or fanatic. He continued to have a healthy contempt for such types. It would be more accurate to say that he had achieved a very deep understanding of a remote, rarely penetrated part of existence in which intelligence and will, besides those of mankind, exist. Nor did he worship this other essence. Rather, he empathized and communed with it. And so these two forces, the atheistic and the satanic, coexisted in varying proportions for the entire duration of the Church of Satan. So the reason that the story of the atheistic, skeptical Church of Satan doesn't make sense is because it isn't true. According to Aquino, in public, LaVey spoke of Satanism as atheism with frills, but when he was alone with intimates, he would speak of Satan, the Church, and his office with the greatest reverence, and a deep understanding of a remote, rarely penetrated part of existence in which intelligence and will, besides those of mankind, exist. He empathized and communed with this intelligence. In other words, Satan. He seems to be implying that the positioning as atheists was just for public consumption, while LaVey's inner circle received the real dogma, where Satan was an abstract intelligence that you could commune with, talk to, and even bargain with. Now, there are people who call themselves LaVeyan Satanists who will vigorously defend LaVey from accusations that he believed in the existence of Satan, and those critics will point out that Michael Aquino left the church on bad terms, so presumably we shouldn't believe anything he had to say. But Aquino was LaVey's scribe, secretary, and friend for years. He wrote the church's newsletter, and he was as close to LaVey personally as anyone in the upper echelon of the church. And moreover, Aquino quotes another of LaVey's inner circle, Ed Weber, saying the exact same thing about LaVey's belief in the devil. So why the double standard? Why have one dogma for your inner circle and a different one for everyone else? There are some indications LaVey intended to run the Church of Satan, at least partially, as an initiatory order or mystery school, like Aleister Crowley's OTO or Rosicrucianism, and in that case, reserving the true gnosis for only the most committed students would make total sense. Aquino suggests that it may have been a strategic choice to ward off any potential social costs or risk of actual violence, since the average Christian American would almost certainly hear LaVey's nuanced conception of an abstract satanic intelligence as just code words for devil worship. Obviously, this doesn't mean that LaVeyan Satanists were guilty of human sacrifice or any of the other ridiculous slanders that evangelicals of the time leveled at them, but it is remarkable that this aspect of the Church of Satan could be covered up so successfully that Reddit tier atheists will scoff at you for mentioning it. Aquino may have left on bad terms, but the words of defectors are considered an invaluable source of inside information in religious scholarship for their willingness to expose the more controversial aspects of their former religions. The earliest public accounts of Mormon polygamy came from ex-Mormons, for example, and the contents of the Talmud only became known to Gentiles because a Jewish convert to Catholicism gave some translated passages to the Pope. The current incarnation of the Church of Satan sticks to the atheism story, and some people are highly committed to gatekeeping the term Satanism to only include atheistic humanist beliefs like the Satanic Temple. But Anton LaVey lied constantly about being a police photographer and a lion tamer, about dating Marilyn Monroe and Jane Mansfield, about playing the devil in Rosemary's Baby and watching secret underground satanic films in Germany as a youth. The idea that he'd lie about the contents of his own religion shouldn't come as a shock to anyone. If anything, the expectation that LaVey would have cordoned off his Satanism from his general disposition as a carny showman seems very unsatanic. He was a huckster about everything, including his own religion. And that's kind of the whole point.